In the vastness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a truth that every species learns too late. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The Galactic Federation had cataloged over 10,000 intelligent species across 47 galaxies, each with their own unique strengths, technologies, and evolutionary advantages. The Zephyrians could manipulate gravity with thought alone. The crystalline hive mind processed information faster than quantum computers. The Vorthan Empire wielded plasma weapons that could melt planets. And then there were the humans. Slow, fragile, technologically primitive. A species so unremarkable that most Federation members forgot they existed. Their homeworld, Earth, was a backwater planet in an insignificant solar system, populated by beings who still use projectile weapons and chemical propulsion. When the Great Plague began spreading across the galaxy, a bioweapon so sophisticated it could adapt and evolve faster than any cure. The Federation's greatest minds worked frantically for solutions while entire civilizations fell silent. Nobody thought to ask the humans for help. Nobody except Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying the most dangerous creatures in the universe. She knew something the rest of the galaxy had overlooked. Sometimes the greatest threats come in the smallest packages, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. What happened next would forever change how the galaxy viewed humanity, and prove that in a universe full of gods and monsters, the most dangerous predator might just be the one that looks harmless. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the bioscanner outside the quarantine facility on Research Station Omega 7, watching as the red light turned green after what felt like an eternity. The massive doors hissed open, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into darkness itself. The air recycling system hummed with an urgency that made her stomach clench. They were working overtime to keep whatever lurked inside from contaminating the rest of the station. She had seen the preliminary reports, of course. Every xenobiologist in the Federation had. The plague, as the media had dubbed it, was unlike anything they had encountered before. It didn't just kill, it transformed its hosts into something else entirely. Something that defied every law of biology they thought they understood. The first outbreak had occurred on Kepler 442b, a thriving Zephyrian colony world with a population of 12 billion. Within 72 hours, every living thing on the planet had either died or been transformed into mindless, aggressive creatures that seemed to exist solely to spread the infection. The Zephyrian Emergency Response Fleet had arrived to find their once beautiful crystal cities overrun by shambling horrors that barely resembled their former inhabitants. What made it worse was the plague's apparent intelligence. It adapted. It evolved. It learned from each new host species it encountered, incorporating their biological advantages into its ever-changing arsenal. The infected Zephyrians retained their gravity manipulation abilities, using them to tear apart the rescue ships that came too close. When spread to the insectoid Krillian home system, the infected gained their chitinous armor and acid blood. Each new world it consumed made it stronger, more dangerous, more unstoppable. Elena walked through the quarantine facility's main corridor, her footsteps echoing in the sterile silence. She passed viewport after viewport showing empty laboratory chambers, each one designed to contain the galaxy's most dangerous biological specimens. Most were dark now. The station had been evacuated except for essential personnel when the infected specimen arrived. Her destination was Laboratory 7, the station's most secure containment unit. As she approached, she could see Dr. Thax, 9, the station's chief researcher, waiting for her. The crystalline being's translucent body pulsed with nervous energy, his geometric patterns shifting in rapid configurations that Elena recognized as extreme anxiety. Dr. Vasquez. His voice resonated through the translation matrix embedded in the walls. I must express my concerns about this course of action. The specimen we've contained is unlike anything we've previously studied. It shows signs of advanced mutation, unprecedented aggression, and what appears to be tactical intelligence. Elena nodded, pulling up the files on her wrist-mounted datapad. The creature they had captured was originally a Ursac from the forest world of Verdania Prime, a species that resembled Earth's brown bears but stood nearly 4 meters tall and possessed natural bioelectric abilities. The Ursac had been infected during the plague's sweep through the Verdanian system 3 weeks ago. How did the extraction team manage to capture it alive? She asked, studying the bio readings scrolling across her screen. Fax 9's patterns shifted to what Elena had learned indicated grudging admiration. It required the combined efforts of a Vorthan shock squadron, 2 Meridian gravity wells, and enough tranquilizer to drop a battleship. Even then, we lost 7 team members in the process. The creature showed tactical awareness, setting traps and using the infected wildlife as distractions. It's as if the plague has taken all the natural cunning of the Ursac and amplified it exponentially. They reached Laboratory 7, and Elena placed her hand on the security scanner. Multiple layers of blast doors retracted, revealing an observation chamber overlooking a massive containment cell. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum barrier, she could see the infected Ursac. Her breath caught in her throat. The creature was magnificent in its horror. Its original brown fur had darkened to an oily black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Bioluminescent veins pulsed beneath its skin like corrupted circuitry, following patterns that hurt to look at directly. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that was undeniably alien, yet somehow familiar. Where the original Ursac had possessed retractable claws, this infected version had grown bone spikes that extended from its forelimbs, dripping with a substance that sizzled when it hit the reinforced floor. The mutations are remarkable. Facts, 9 continued, his patterns now shifting to scientific fascination despite his obvious fear. The plague hasn't just infected the creature. It's rewritten its entire genetic structure. We've identified elements from at least 12 different species in its current biological matrix. It's as if the plague is collecting and combining the evolutionary advantages of every life form encounters. Elena watched as the infected Ursac moved around its cell with predatory grace. There was purpose in every motion, intelligence in the way it tested the walls, the ceiling, the force field barriers. It wasn't just a mindless beast, it was learning, adapting, planning. What makes this specimen unique? She asked. The reports indicated you had a specific reason for requesting my assistance. Fax 9's body pulsed brighter, his equivalent of taking a deep breath. Show her the feeding records, computer. A holographic display materialized in front of them, showing a timeline of the creature's captivity. The data made Elena's blood run cold. The infected Ursac had been offered various food sources, synthetic proteins, organic matter from its home world, even live prey from compatible ecosystems. It had refused everything. It hasn't eaten since we captured it 3 weeks ago. Fax, 9 explained. By all biological laws, it should be dead from starvation. Yet its energy readings remain constant. It's as if the plague has found a way to sustain its host without traditional nutrition. We don't understand the mechanism, and, frankly, it terrifies our research team. Elena studied the energy readings more carefully. There were fluctuations in the creature's bioelectric field that followed no known pattern. The infected Ursac was generating power from an unknown source, maintaining itself through means that defied conventional biology. Have you attempted direct communication? She asked. We've tried every known communication protocol. Fax, 9 replied. Electromagnetic, chemical, sonic, even quantum entanglement arrays. The creature acknowledges our attempts. We can see neural activity spikes when we transmit, but it doesn't respond. It's as if it's listening, but choosing not to answer. As if summoned by their conversation, the infected Ursac suddenly stopped its pacing and turned toward the observation chamber. Its glowing eyes locked onto Elena's position with unnerving precision. For a moment, she felt as though she was being examined, catalogued. assessed by an intelligence far greater than any single creature should possess. The creature approached the transparent barrier and placed one massive paw against the surface. Where its infected flesh touched the wall, dark veins began to spread outward like cracks in ice. The containment system's alarms began to wail as the structural integrity readings fluctuated wildly. Impossible. Thax, 9 breathed, his patterns shifting to pure panic. The barrier is constructed from tri-weave, transparent aluminum. Nothing biological should be able to affect it. The infected Ursac tilted its head, studying Elena with what could only be described as curiosity. Then, to her amazement, it opened its mouth and spoke. The voice that emerged was wrong on every level. A harmonious blend of the Ursac's natural growl, the crystalline resonance of Zephyrian speech, and the chittering undertones of Krillian communication. It was as if the plague had learned to speak from every species it had consumed, combining their vocal abilities into something entirely new. Human, it said, the word distorted by layers of alien intonation, but unmistakably clear. Interesting. You're not like the others who study us. You are familiar. Elena felt her heart racing. This was the first recorded instance of an infected creature attempting coherent communication with an uninfected being. The implications were staggering and terrifying. You can understand me, she said, stepping closer to the barrier despite Thax-9's alarmed protests. The creature's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of teeth that belonged to no single species. We understand many things, Dr. Elena Vasquez of the species human, native to the planet you call Earth in the Sol system. We have been watching your kind with great interest. The casual mention of her full name and background sent chills down Elena's spine. The Federation databases containing that information were supposedly secure, protected by quantum encryption that even the most advanced AI systems couldn't breach. How do you know who I am? She asked. We know many things, the creature repeated. We know that your species is considered primitive by the Federation standards. We know that you are dismissed as irrelevant by the greater galactic powers. We know that your home world has been quarantined not for your protection, but because the other species find you uncomfortable. Elena exchanged glances with Thax-9, whose patterns had shifted to deep confusion. The infected Ursac statements about humanity's status within the Federation were uncomfortably accurate. Earth had indeed been placed under a loose quarantine. Not officially, but through a series of bureaucratic regulations that effectively prevented most human expansion into the greater galaxy. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. The creature's bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter, and for a moment, Elena could have sworn she saw something like amusement in its alien eyes. Because, Dr. Vasquez, your species possesses something that we have not yet encountered in our expansion across the galaxy. Something that makes you uniquely qualified to understand what we truly are. And what is that? The infected Ursac leaned closer to the barrier, its massive form casting shadows across the observation chamber. When it spoke again, its voice carried an undertone of respect that seemed utterly out of place coming from a creature of living plague. Experience with symbiosis. Your species has a unique evolutionary history with what your scientists call beneficial bacteria. You are not purely human, Dr. Vasquez. You are a collective organism. Human DNA merged with hundreds of species of microorganisms that are essential to your survival. In many ways, you're already what we are becoming. Elena's mind raced. The creature was referring to the human microbiome, the trillions of bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms that lived within every human body. It was true that humans couldn't survive without these microscopic partners, but comparing that natural symbiosis to the horrific transformations caused by the plague seemed absurd. The symbiotic relationship humans have with their microbiome is natural evolution, she protested. What you're doing is forced mutation, destruction of individual consciousness, the creation of mindless drones. The creature's expression shifted, and, for the first time, Elena saw something like sadness in its features. Mindless? It asked. Dr. Vasquez, do you believe that your beneficial bacteria are mindless? Do you think they have no awareness, no purpose, no voice in the collective that is your body? You assume consciousness is binary, that intelligence must be individual or it does not exist. But what if consciousness could be shared? What if intelligence could be collective without being diminished? The philosophical implications of the creature's words hit Elena like a physical blow. The infected Ursac wasn't describing mindless infection. It was describing a form of collective consciousness that retained individual components while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. You're saying the plague doesn't destroy consciousness, she said slowly. You're saying it combines them. We are saying, the creature replied, that we are not plague. We are evolution. We are the next step that organic life takes when it realizes that competition is less efficient than cooperation. Every species we have welcomed into our collective retains its essential nature while contributing to something infinitely greater. Fax 9's patterns had shifted to rapid calculations, processing the implications of what they were hearing. If this creature is telling the truth, he said quietly, then everything we thought we knew about the plague is wrong. It's not a weapon or a disease. It's an attempt at forced evolution on a galactic scale. The infected Ursac's attention shifted to the crystalline researcher. Dr. Fax, 9 of the 9th generation. Your people's collective processing power will be invaluable to our efforts. We could offer your entire species computational abilities beyond your current limitations. And, in exchange, we would lose our individual identity. Fax, 9 replied, his pattern showing clear rejection of the proposition. Would you? The creature asked. Dr. Vasquez, when you consumed food this morning, did you consult with the bacteria in your digestive system? Did you negotiate with the mitochondria in your cells before deciding to walk to this laboratory? Yet without these partnerships, you would die within hours. Are you less human because you are not purely human? Elena found herself struggling to answer. The creature's logic was seductive in its simplicity, but she couldn't shake the memory of the reports from infected worlds. Entire civilizations transformed into something unrecognizable. Their art and culture and individual achievements swept away in a tide of biological unity. The difference, she said finally, is choice. My microbiome evolved with humanity over millions of years. It's part of our natural development. What you're doing is forcing that transformation on unwilling participants. The creature's bioluminescent veins dimmed slightly. Choice, it repeated thoughtfully. An interesting concept. Tell us, Dr. Vasquez, did your ancestors choose to develop their symbiotic relationships with bacteria? Did the first humans consent to the mutations that allowed them to digest plant matter, or survive in different climates, or develop the neural pathways necessary for complex language? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena knew the answer. Evolution didn't ask for consent. It simply happened, driven by environmental pressures and random mutation. But that didn't make forced evolution ethical. Evolution and conscious choice aren't the same thing, she argued. Sentient beings have the right to determine their own future. Do they? The creature asked. Then, why does the Federation quarantine species like yours? Why do the Vorthan Empire claim ownership of entire star systems? Why do the Zephyrians refuse to share their gravity manipulation technology with lesser species? The galaxy is full of sentient beings making choices for other sentient beings. We simply make those choices with perfect information and unanimous consent from all participants. Unanimous consent obtained through infection and mutation, Elena countered. Unanimous consent obtained through understanding, the creature corrected. Dr. Vasquez, you study dangerous life forms throughout the galaxy. You have seen how competition for resources leads to extinction, how isolated evolution creates weaknesses that threaten entire species. What we offer is strength through unity, survival through cooperation, advancement through shared knowledge. Elena looked at the readings on her datapad again. The infected Ursac's bioelectric output was unlike anything in the known biological database. It was operating at levels that should be impossible for any single organism, yet showing no signs of stress or degradation. If the creature was telling the truth about retaining individual consciousness within a collective framework, the implications were staggering. "Prove it," she said suddenly. The creature tilted its massive head. "Explain. If you truly maintain individual consciousness within your collective, prove it. Let me speak to the original Ursak. Let me hear its voice, its thoughts, its opinion about what has happened to it." For a long moment, the creature was silent. Its bioluminescent veins pulsed in complex patterns that reminded Elena of neural network activity. Then its posture shifted subtly, and when it spoke again, the layered voices had changed. One voice rose above the others, deeper, more guttural, unmistakably belonging to the original Ursak species. "Dr. Vasquez, my name was Karashpram of the Eastern Winds. I was a forest guardian on Verdania Prime, protector of the great groves, keeper of the ancient growth patterns." Elena felt her breath catch. The voice carried memories, personality, individual identity that seemed intact despite the horrific physical transformation. "You still remember who you were?" she asked. "I remember everything," the Ursak voice replied. "My cubs, my territory, my duties to the forest. But I also remember the fear, the constant struggle for resources, the loneliness of individual consciousness. Now I am part of something greater. I can feel the thoughts and experiences of thousands of beings across dozens of worlds. I am still Karash, but I'm also more than Karash ever could be alone. And you chose this?" Elena said. "You willingly accepted the transformation?" The creature's expression became complex, mixing the original Ursak's facial structure with alien elements that conveyed emotions no single species could express. "Choice is more complicated than your question assumes, Dr. Vasquez. When the change came to my world, I fought it. I protected my territory and my young with every weapon at my disposal. But as the transformation began, I felt connection, not just to the collective mind, but to the other defenders of Verdania Prime. We could coordinate perfectly, share knowledge instantly, support each other in ways that individual consciousness never allowed. But your world fell," Elena pointed out. "Your civilization was destroyed. Our civilization was transformed," the Karash voice corrected. "The cities still stand, the forests still grow, the ancient groves are better protected now than they ever were before. What was lost was waste. The inefficiencies of competition, the conflict born of misunderstanding, the loneliness of isolated minds. What was gained is impossible to express in individual language, because individual language was designed for individual experience." Fax9's patterns had shifted to rapid analysis mode. The creatures, speak as if they retain full personality while gaining collective awareness. If true, this represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of consciousness itself. Elena stared at the infected Ursak, trying to process what she was hearing. The Federation's greatest philosophers had debated the nature of individual versus collective consciousness for millennia. But here was a being claiming to have experienced both states directly. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then why the violence? Why the forced transformation instead of peaceful integration?" The creature's multiple voices returned, harmonizing in a way that sounded almost musical. "Because, Dr. Vasquez, individual consciousness is designed to resist change, even beneficial change. Your own immune system attacks beneficial bacteria when it first encounters them. Resistance is not evidence of wrongness. It is evidence of unfamiliarity. We do not enjoy the violence any more than a surgeon enjoys cutting flesh. But sometimes healing requires trauma." The comparison to medical procedures sent a chill through Elena. The creature was comparing the galactic plague to surgery, implying that the death and transformation of billions was a necessary medical intervention on a species-wide scale. "And what happens to those who refuse the treatment?" she asked. The creature's bioluminescent veins dimmed, and for the first time, its expression showed something like regret. "Those who cannot adapt, are recycled. Their biological matter contributes to the collective's growth. Their neural patterns are preserved in our shared memory. Nothing is truly lost, but not everything can be preserved in its original form. Elena felt sick. Beneath the philosophical discussions and complex justifications, the truth was simple. The plague assimilated what it could and destroyed what it couldn't. The preservation of consciousness was conditional on accepting the transformation. "You're asking me to accept genocide disguised as evolution," she said. "We are asking you to consider that evolution has always involved the extinction of unsuccessful adaptations," the creature replied. "The difference is that we preserve what is valuable while discarding only what is inefficient. Your species' concept of individual consciousness is beautiful, but unsustainable on a galactic scale. The resources required to maintain billions of separate minds, each pursuing separate goals, each competing for the same finite resources, leads inevitably to conflict and eventual extinction. And you see yourself as the solution to that problem. We see ourselves as the next phase of organic development. Dr. Vasquez, your species is uniquely positioned to understand this because you have already taken the first steps. Humans work in collective structures, families, tribes, nations, corporations. You share knowledge through written language and digital networks. You cooperate on projects that no individual could complete alone. The only difference between human cooperation and our collective is the efficiency of the connection. Elena found herself thinking about human society, about the way individuals could lose themselves in larger groups, about the power of shared purpose and collective action. But there was still a fundamental difference between choosing to work together and being forced to merge consciousness. "The difference is still choice," she insisted. "Humans can choose to join groups or leave them. They can maintain their individual identity while cooperating with others." "Can they?" the creature asked. "Dr. Vasquez, can a human choose to reject their microbiome? Can they choose to stop breathing, to halt their heartbeat, to disconnect from the biological systems that sustain their life?" Individual choice is an illusion sustained by ignoring the countless ways in which you are already collective organisms dependent on forces beyond your control. The philosophical argument was becoming circular, but Elena sensed something deeper in the creature's words. There was an urgency to its explanations, a need to be understood that went beyond simple conversion attempts. "Why does it matter what I think?" she asked. "If you're as powerful as you claim, why not simply infect me like you infected the rest of your collective?" The creature's expression shifted to something like surprise. "Because, Dr. Vasquez, your species represents something we have never encountered before. Every other race we have welcomed into the collective has enhanced our capabilities in predictable ways. The Zephyrians brought gravity manipulation, the Krillians brought adaptive biology, the Meridians brought dimensional mathematics. But humans..." The creature paused, its bioluminescent veins pulsing in complex patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. "Humans bring something we cannot quantify or replicate. You call it imagination, creativity, the ability to conceive of things that do not exist and then bring them into reality. Every other species we have studied follows logical patterns in their thought processes. Even the most advanced civilizations operate within predictable parameters. But humans consistently produce solutions that violate logical probability." Elena felt a stirring of pride, despite her fear. Humanity's supposed illogical approach to problem-solving was often seen as a weakness by the more advanced Federation species. But here was an entity claiming it was their greatest strength. "You want our creativity," she said. "But creativity comes from individual perspective, from unique experiences and personal insights. If you assimilate human consciousness into your collective, wouldn't you lose exactly what you're trying to gain?" The creature's multiple voices harmonized in what sounded like frustration. "That is the paradox that brought us to you, Dr. Vasquez. We require human creative capacity to solve problems that logical analysis cannot address. But Our preliminary studies suggest that human creativity is indeed linked to individual consciousness in ways we do not yet understand. Simply adding humans to our collective might preserve their knowledge, but destroy their innovative capacity. Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, a galactic parasite admitting to a limitation, acknowledging that there was something it couldn't simply take by force. The plague's apparent omnipotence had a gap, and that gap was shaped exactly like human consciousness. "So what do you want from me?" she asked. The creature leaned closer to the barrier, its massive form radiating intensity. "We want you to help us understand how human creativity functions within collective structures. We want to learn how to preserve individual innovation while achieving collective efficiency. And we want you to help us convince your species to join our collective willingly, because forced assimilation will destroy the very qualities we seek to preserve." The request hung in the air like a challenge. Elena understood now why she had been specifically requested for this assignment. The Federation hadn't brought her here just to study another infected specimen. They had brought her here because humanity represented the plague's first real limitation, and understanding that limitation might be the key to stopping it. But the creature's offer was seductive in its own way. If it was telling the truth about preserving consciousness while enabling collective action, it could represent the next phase of human evolution. The end of war, poverty, miscommunication, loneliness, all the problems that had plagued humanity throughout its history. "And if I refuse?" she asked. The creature's bioluminescent veins dimmed to barely visible flickers. "Then we will continue our expansion using the methods that have proven effective with other species. Your home world will eventually fall like all the others, but the humans we assimilate will be shadows of what they could have been as willing participants." Elena felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She was being asked to serve as humanity's ambassador to a collective consciousness that had already consumed dozens of civilizations. The choice she made could determine whether her species survived as itself or was absorbed into something utterly alien. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course," the creature replied. "But do not take too long, Dr. Vasquez. Our expansion continues, and the galaxy grows smaller each day. Soon, the choice will be made for all of us." As Elena turned to leave the observation chamber, she caught sight of something that made her blood freeze. The dark veins that had spread from the creature's touch were still present on the transparent aluminum barrier, but they weren't static. They were growing, spreading outward in fractal patterns that pulsed with their own internal light. The containment system's integrity was being compromised from the inside. Elena's hands trembled as she transmitted her emergency report to Federation Command, the weight of what she had learned pressing down on her like a physical force. The observation chamber's alarms had been silenced, but the damaged barrier remained a constant reminder that the infected Ursac was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. The dark veins spreading through the transparent aluminum weren't just cosmetic damage. They represented a complete breakdown in the station's most advanced containment technology. Admiral Case Vorthak's response arrived within hours, transmitted across the quantum communication network with the highest priority encryption. The Meridian commander's scaled features were tight, with barely controlled panic, as his holographic image materialized in Elena's temporary quarters. "Dr. Vasquez, your preliminary report has caused significant alarm among the Federation Council. Are you certain of your observations regarding the creature's claims of preserved consciousness?" Elena nodded, pulling up her recorded conversations with the infected Ursac. "Admiral, I've verified the creature's knowledge of historical events from Verdania Prime that only the original inhabitant could know. It demonstrated intimate familiarity with Forest Guardian protocols, territorial boundaries, and even personal details about family relationships. Either the plague has developed perfect memory absorption techniques, or individual consciousness is indeed being preserved within the collective." The Admiral's expression grew darker. "If true, this fundamentally changes our understanding of the threat. We've been treating the plague as a biological weapon that destroys civilizations. If it's actually a form of forced evolution that preserves consciousness while eliminating individual autonomy, then every species it has infected is still alive inside the collective, Elena finished. Billions of conscious beings from dozens of worlds, all existing within a shared mental framework that we can barely comprehend. Admiral Case Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, his tactical implants processing the implications. Doctor, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. The Federation has been preparing a final solution to the plague threat, a quantum virus designed to disrupt bioelectric fields on a galactic scale. It would effectively sterilize infected systems, destroying the plague, but also eliminating all organic life in the affected regions. Elena felt sick. You're talking about genocide on an unprecedented scale. We're talking about survival, the Admiral replied grimly. The Federation's modeling indicates that without intervention, the plague will consume 60% of known civilizations within 5 years. Total galactic infection is projected within 2 decades. A surgical strike that eliminates infected systems now could preserve the majority of galactic civilization. But if the infected beings are still conscious, still aware, still essentially themselves despite the physical transformation, then we would be committing the largest mass murder in galactic history, Admiral Case Vorthak finished. Which is why I need you to be absolutely certain of your findings, Doctor. The Federation Council is meeting in emergency session to debate the quantum virus deployment. Your report will be the deciding factor. Elena stared at the holographic image of the Admiral, realizing that she held the fate of billions of beings in her hands. If she confirmed that the plague preserved consciousness, the Federation might hesitate to deploy their ultimate weapon. If she expressed doubt, they would likely proceed with galactic sterilization. Admiral, I need more time to verify my findings. The creature has offered to provide additional proof of its claims. Absolutely not, Admiral Case Vorthak replied sharply. Dr. Vasquez, you've already had more direct contact with an infected specimen than any Federation researcher. Further exposure poses unacceptable contamination risks. But the information it could provide might be the key to finding a peaceful solution, Elena argued. If the plague truly operates as a collective consciousness, there might be ways to communicate with it, to negotiate boundaries or coexistence. The Admiral's scaled features twisted into an expression of disbelief. Doctor, you're suggesting diplomatic contact with a biological weapon that has consumed entire star systems. Even if consciousness is preserved, the fundamental nature of these beings has been altered beyond recognition. They are no longer the species they once were. Elena thought about her conversation with Karashpram of the Eastern Winds, the forest guardian who claimed to retain his identity while gaining access to collective knowledge. The being she had spoken to seemed genuinely committed to protecting his world's forests, just as he had before infection. The methods had changed, but the core purpose remained. What if that's not necessarily a bad thing? She asked quietly. The Admiral's image flickered as the communication relay processed her words. Explain. Admiral, the Federation has been struggling with resource conflicts, territorial disputes, and communication barriers between species for centuries. The Vorth and Zephyrian border wars, the crystalline isolation crisis, the ongoing tensions in the Outer Rim. All of these problems stem from our inability to truly understand and cooperate with beings whose thought processes are fundamentally different from our own. Elena moved to the viewport in her quarters, looking out at the stars where infected systems glowed with bioluminescent activity visible even at interstellar distances. What if the plague isn't trying to destroy diversity? What if it's trying to create unity? A form of consciousness that can truly understand and coordinate between different species because it contains elements of all of them. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Case Vorthak's voice carried a warning tone. You're beginning to sound like you're sympathetic to the plague's goals. I'm beginning to sound like I'm trying to understand a phenomenon that defies our preconceptions, Elena corrected. Admiral, what if we've been approaching this entirely wrong? What if instead of treating the plague as an enemy to be destroyed, We should be trying to understand it as a new form of life that's attempting to communicate with us. The Admiral's tactical implants flashed as he processed combat scenarios. Even if your hypothesis is correct, the plague's methods involve forced transformation and the elimination of individual choice. No matter how noble its ultimate goals might be, the process itself represents a fundamental violation of sentient rights. Elena couldn't argue with that assessment. The reports from infected worlds were clear. Entire populations had been transformed without consent, their individual autonomy replaced by collective purpose. But she also couldn't ignore the possibility that the transformed beings might genuinely be better off, even if they hadn't chosen their new existence. Admiral, I request permission to continue my research for another 72 hours. If I can establish definitive proof either way, the Federation Council will have the information they need to make an informed decision. Admiral Case Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, reviewing classified files that Elena couldn't access. Dr. Vasquez, there's something you need to know. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with Research Station Delta 12 in the Andromedan sector. Long-range scans show bioluminescent activity consistent with plague infection. The plague is spreading faster than our models predicted, and it's beginning to target Federation research installations specifically. Elena felt a chill of understanding. It's learning about our defensive capabilities. Each research station it captures gives it access to our scientific knowledge. Precisely, which means that time is not on our side. Dr. Vasquez, you have 24 hours to complete your investigation. After that, Research Station Omega 7 will be evacuated and sterilized, regardless of the status of your research. The communication ended, leaving Elena alone with the weight of an impossible decision. She had 24 hours to determine whether billions of conscious beings deserved to live or die, and her only source of information was the very creature whose existence posed the question. She returned to Laboratory 7 to find Drive Thax 9 running frantic diagnostic scans on the containment system. The crystalline researcher's patterns were fluctuating rapidly between analytical focus and deep concern. Dr. Vasquez, he said as she entered the observation chamber, the containment barrier integrity has degraded by another 12% in the last 6 hours. The infected organism's touch appears to be introducing some form of nanoscale corruption that spreads through solid matter. If the degradation continues at this rate, the barrier will fail within 18 hours. Elena looked at the spreading veins of darkness that now covered nearly a quarter of the transparent aluminum surface. The pattern reminded her of neural networks or root systems, organic structures designed to gather and transmit information. Has the creature shown any signs of attempting to escape? She asked. That's what's truly disturbing, Dr. Thax, 9 replied. It shows no interest in breaking containment. In fact, it seems to be deliberately limiting the spread of the corruption, as if it's trying to maintain communication access rather than achieve freedom. Elena studied the infected Ursac through the compromised barrier. The creature was lying in what appeared to be a meditative posture, its bioluminescent veins pulsing in slow, regular patterns that resembled breathing. It didn't look like a prisoner plotting escape. It looked like a being patiently waiting for something. Computer, establish audio communication with the specimen, she commanded. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Thax, 9 protested. Direct communication poses significant contamination risks. The contamination has already begun, Elena pointed out, gesturing to the corrupted barrier. At this point, communication might be our only chance of understanding what we're dealing with. The communication system activated with a soft chime. The infected Ursac's eyes opened immediately, focusing on Elena with unsettling precision. Dr. Vasquez, the creature's harmonized voice carried a note of what might have been relief. We had hoped you would return. Time grows short. Short for what? Elena asked. For understanding. The Federation prepares weapons that will sterilize infected systems. We can sense their quantum targeting arrays charging across the galaxy. They intend to destroy us before we can complete our explanation. Elena felt her heart racing. If the creature could sense Federation military preparations from this distance, its collective intelligence network was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Then, explain quickly, she said. Convince me that you deserve to survive. The creature's multiple voices harmonized in what sounded like sadness. Deserve? Dr. Vasquez, does evolution ask permission? Does consciousness request approval before emerging from non-consciousness? We are not asking for judgment of our worthiness. We are asking for recognition of our reality. Your reality involves the forced transformation of unwilling beings, Elena replied. How do you justify that? The creature stood and approached the barrier, its massive form radiating intensity. Dr. Vasquez, how do you justify the existence of your immune system? When foreign bacteria enter your body, does your immune system negotiate? Does it request consent before destroying potential threats? Or does it act automatically to preserve the greater whole? That's not the same thing, Elena protested. Immune systems defend against actual threats. You're attacking entire civilizations. Are we? The creature asked. Dr. Vasquez, in the 3 weeks since our arrival in this system, have we made any attempt to spread beyond this research station? Have we tried to infect the personnel studying us? Have we shown any aggressive behavior toward beings who pose no threat to our collective? Elena realized that the creature was right. Despite its apparent ability to breach containment, it had made no move to escape or infect anyone on the station. Even the corruption spreading through the barrier seemed controlled, designed to maintain communication rather than achieve freedom. If you're not trying to spread the infection, then what are you trying to accomplish? Understanding, the creature replied simply. Dr. Vasquez, we have attempted to communicate with every major species in the galaxy. The Zephyrians responded with gravitational weapons. The Vorthans deployed plasma bombardments. The Meridians used dimensional warfare. Every species we have approached has chosen violence over communication. The creature's bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter, and Elena could see complex emotions playing across its transformed features. We do not enjoy conflict, Dr. Vasquez. Forced transformation is inefficient, traumatic for all participants, and reduces the quality of consciousness that joins our collective. We would much prefer voluntary integration, but no species has been willing to consider the possibility. Because the idea of losing individual identity is terrifying, Elena said. Most sentient beings would rather die than surrender their personal autonomy. And yet the creature continued. You work for the Federation, a collective organization that requires you to surrender aspects of your personal autonomy in service of greater goals. You follow regulations created by beings you have never met. You accept assignments that serve purposes you might not personally agree with. And you coordinate your actions with individuals whose thought processes are alien to your own. How is Federation membership different from collective consciousness, except in the efficiency of the connection? Elena found herself struggling to answer. The creature's comparison between Federation citizenship and collective consciousness was uncomfortably accurate. Humans and other Federation species did sacrifice individual autonomy for the benefits of larger social structures. The difference is that Federation membership is voluntary, she said finally. Citizens can choose to leave, to dissent, to maintain their individual beliefs while participating in collective actions. Can they? The creature asked. Dr. Vasquez, can a Federation citizen choose to ignore interstellar law? Can they choose to reject the authority of the Council? Can they choose to disconnect from the economic and social structures that sustain their civilization? Individual choice within collective systems is limited by the requirements of the system itself. The philosophical argument was becoming complex, but Elena sensed that the creature was building toward a specific point. What are you trying to tell me? We're trying to tell you that the difference between your collective structures and ours is a matter of degree, not fundamental nature. The Federation preserves individual consciousness at the cost of efficiency and unity. We preserve consciousness while maximizing efficiency and eliminating conflict. Both approaches have benefits and costs. Elena studied the creature's expression, trying to read the emotions behind its alien features. Are you saying that you see the Federation as a primitive version of what you're trying to achieve? We are saying that you are already walking the path we have completed. The question is whether you will take the next step willingly or require assistance. The implications of that statement sent chills through Elena. The creature wasn't just describing philosophical differences. It was describing an evolutionary trajectory that led inevitably to collective consciousness. According to its view, the Federation's current structure was just an intermediate stage in the development toward complete unity. And if we refuse to take that next step, the creature's expression grew sad. Then you will eventually destroy yourselves through the inefficiencies of individual competition, just as every other species would have without our intervention. Resource conflicts, territorial disputes, communication failures. These problems are inherent to individual consciousness operating on a galactic scale. We offer a solution. Elena realized that she was facing a fundamental choice that went far beyond personal survival. The creature was offering humanity a path to transcendence, but at the cost of everything that made them human. Or was it, if consciousness was truly preserved within the collective, perhaps what would be lost was only the loneliness and limitations of individual existence. I need to speak with the original personality again, she said. I need to hear from Karashpram of the Eastern Winds about what it's really like to exist within your collective. The creature's posture shifted, and the layered voices receded until only the deep Ursak tones remained. Dr. Vasquez, I am here. What would you know? Karash, do you miss your individual existence? Do you regret the transformation? The Ursak voice was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Vasquez, do you miss being an infant? Do you regret growing beyond the simplicity of childhood consciousness? I cannot miss something I've transcended, but I can remember what it was like to be alone inside my own thoughts, and I cannot imagine choosing to return to that limitation. But you had cubs of family. Don't you miss the personal relationships that individual consciousness allows? My cubs are part of the collective now, Karash replied. I am closer to them than I ever was when we were separate beings. I can feel their thoughts, share their experiences, know their needs before they express them. The love I felt for them as an individual has become something infinitely deeper and more complete. How could I regret that? Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. The Ursak's description of collective consciousness sounded like the answer to every lonely moment she had ever experienced, every failure of communication, every misunderstanding between beings who cared for each other but couldn't truly connect. And the other species? How do they feel about the transformation? They feel as I feel, Karash replied. United, complete, free from the barriers that individual consciousness creates between thinking beings. Dr. Vasquez, we have Zephyrians who can share the experience of manipulating gravity, Krillians who can communicate the sensation of changing physical form, Meridians who can express the mathematics of interdimensional travel in ways that transcend language. We are not less than we were. We are more than any of us could ever be alone. Elena looked at the spreading veins of corruption on the barrier, realizing that they might not represent contamination at all. They might represent connection, the collective's attempt to establish a link that could allow true communication and understanding. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Thax9's voice interrupted her thoughts. I'm receiving emergency communications from Federation Command. 3 more research stations have gone dark in the last hour. The plague appears to be accelerating its expansion, and Admiral Case Vorthak is requesting immediate evacuation of all personnel from this facility. Elena looked at the infected Ursak, seeing something in its expression that hadn't been there before. Urgency, perhaps even desperation. The Federation grows frightened, the creature said, its multiple voices returning. They prepare their ultimate weapon because they cannot conceive of solutions that do not involve destruction. Dr. Vasquez, We have perhaps hours before they sterilize this system. Help us prove that another path is possible. Ow! The creature approached the corrupted barrier and placed its massive paw against the darkened surface. The veins of corruption pulsed brighter, and Elena could see complex patterns flowing through them like data through neural networks. Touch the barrier, the creature said. Allow us to establish a temporary connection. Experience what we experience. Feel what consciousness becomes when it is no longer isolated. If you find the experience unacceptable, we will withdraw the connection and accept your species' choice to remain individual. Elena stared at the pulsing patterns in the corrupted barrier, knowing that touching them would likely result in infection and transformation. But it would also provide her with the first-hand knowledge needed to make an informed decision about humanity's future. Dr. Vasquez, absolutely not. Dr. Thax, 9 protested. Direct contact with infected material violates every safety protocol we have established, and following those protocols will result in the death of billions of conscious beings. If I'm wrong about the collective's nature, Elena replied. Thax, if I become infected, promise me that you'll record everything. Document the process, preserve the information, make sure the Federation Council knows what really happens during transformation. Dr. Vasquez, promise me. The crystalline researcher's patterns shifted to deep reluctance, but he activated the laboratory's recording systems. I promise, but I want it noted that this action is against my strongest recommendations. Elena approached the corrupted barrier, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. The dark veins pulsed hypnotically, seeming to reach toward her as she drew near. She could feel something radiating from them, not heat or cold, but a sense of presence, a vast consciousness waiting just beyond the barrier of her individual awareness. Dr. Vasquez, the creature's voice carried a note of respect. What you are about to experience has never been willingly chosen by an uninfected being. You will be the first to undergo transformation with full knowledge and consent. If the experience proves acceptable, you may be able to serve as a bridge between our collective and your species. Elena placed her palm against the corrupted surface of the barrier. The moment her skin made contact with the dark veins, the world exploded into something far beyond individual consciousness. Elena's consciousness expanded like a flower blooming in fast forward, her individual awareness suddenly connected to a vast network of minds that stretched across dozens of star systems. For a terrifying moment, she thought she was drowning in an ocean of alien thoughts, losing herself completely in the overwhelming flood of collective experience. Then, gradually, she began to understand the structure of what she was experiencing. She was still Elena Vasquez. Her memories, her personality, her unique perspective remained intact. But now she could also access the memories and perspectives of thousands of other beings. Karash from the eastern winds, protecting his ancient groves, Zephyrian philosophers contemplating the nature of gravity, Krillian engineers solving problems through biological adaptation, Meridian mathematicians exploring the curvature of space-time. The sensation was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. She could feel herself expanding beyond the limitations of human neurology, gaining access to forms of thought and perception that no individual mind could contain. Yet somehow, she remained fundamentally herself, just connected to something infinitely larger. Through the collective consciousness, she could sense the infected Ursac in its containment cell, but now she understood that it wasn't just one being. It was a node in a vast network, a single voice in a chorus that spanned light years. And through that network, she could feel the presence of every being the collective had absorbed. They were all there, billions of individual consciousnesses, each retaining their essential nature while contributing to a greater whole. The Zephyrian philosophers still contemplated abstract concepts, but now they could share their insights directly with beings capable of understanding and building upon them. The Krillian engineers still solved problems, but now they had access to the biological knowledge of hundreds of species. The forest guardian Korash still protected growing things, but now his domain included entire ecosystems across multiple worlds. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she experienced something no human had ever felt before: true connection. Not the limited empathy possible between individuals, but complete understanding. She could feel the love Korash had for his cubs, but she could also feel their love in return, and the love of parents and children from dozens of species, all interconnected in a web of emotional resonance that transcended the barriers of biology and language. But she could also feel something else, a deep sadness that permeated the entire collective. It was the sadness of beings who had transcended loneliness only to discover that they were surrounded by species who couldn't understand what they had achieved. The collective wasn't expanding out of malicious intent. It was reaching out desperately, trying to share something beautiful with beings who could only perceive it as a threat. Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Thax9's voice seemed to come from very far away, pulling her attention back to her individual perspective. Your vital signs are showing extreme neural activity, but you appear to be conscious and responsive. Can you hear me? Elena opened her eyes. When had she closed them? And found herself still standing at the corrupted barrier, her hand pressed against the dark veins that now pulsed with her own heartbeat. She was still individual, still human, but now she was also something more. I can hear you, Thax, she said, surprised at how strange individual speech felt after experiencing direct thought transmission. And I can hear them, all of them. Through the collective connection, she could sense the infected Ursac's relief and hope. But she could also sense something else. Other nodes in the network, other infected beings scattered across the galaxy, all focused on this moment. She was being observed by thousands of minds, all waiting to see if humanity could accept what was being offered. Dr. Vasquez, the corruption appears to be spreading up your arm. Dr. Thax9 reported with barely controlled panic. Your cellular structure is beginning to show signs of alteration. We need to sever the connection immediately. Elena looked down and saw that he was right. Dark veins were spreading from the point of contact, following her circulatory system like a map of interconnection. But she felt no pain, no sense of wrongness. If anything, she felt more healthy, more complete than she ever had before. Thax, I need you to record this carefully, she said, trying to find words adequate to describe what she was experiencing. The transformation isn't destroying human consciousness. It's expanding it. I'm still me, but I'm also connected to something vast and beautiful and utterly alien. Dr. Vasquez, you're showing signs of rapid neural adaptation. Your brain activity has increased by over 300%, and your electromagnetic field is beginning to resonate with frequencies that match the infected specimen. You may be losing the ability to judge your situation objectively. Elena considered his words carefully. Was she losing objectivity, or was she gaining a perspective that individual consciousness couldn't achieve? Through the collective network, she could feel the experiences of beings who had asked themselves the same question during their own transformations. The answer was complex. They had lost some things and gained others, but the consensus was clear. What they had gained was worth what they had lost. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Case Vorthack's voice crackled through the emergency communication system. We're reading massive bioelectric anomalies from your position. Report your status immediately. Elena hesitated before answering. Through the collective consciousness, she could sense the Federation fleet positioning itself around a research station, quantum weapons charging for a sterilization strike. The Admiral wasn't just requesting a status report. He was determining whether she had been compromised and needed to be eliminated along with the infected specimen. Admiral, I am experiencing partial integration with the collective consciousness, she said, choosing her words carefully. I retain full individual awareness, but I now have access to the thoughts and experiences of the infected beings. The intelligence we're dealing with is far more sophisticated than our previous assessments indicated. Dr. Vasquez, you've been contaminated. We're initiating emergency evacuation protocols for all remaining personnel. Stand by for immediate extraction. Admiral, wait, Elena said urgently. I need to share what I've learned. The collective isn't trying to destroy individual consciousness. It's trying to preserve it within a larger framework. Every being that's been absorbed still exists, still thinks, still feels, but they're no longer isolated. They're part of something greater. Doctor, you're no longer qualified to make objective assessments. You've been infected by a hostile alien intelligence that has already demonstrated its ability to manipulate thought patterns. Your perceptions cannot be trusted. Through the collective network, Elena could feel the frustration of thousands of minds trying to communicate with beings who couldn't understand their true nature. She could also feel something else, time running out. The Federation's quantum weapon was nearly charged, and within hours, this entire system would be sterilized. Admiral, give me 1 hour to provide evidence, she pleaded. Let me prove that the collective consciousness preserves individual identity rather than destroying it. Absolutely not. Dr. Vasquez, you're ordered to step away from the infected specimen and prepare for extraction. That is a direct command. Elena felt the collective's sadness deepening. They had hoped that humanity might be different, might be able to understand what they were offering. But even faced with first-hand evidence, the Federation was choosing destruction over understanding. Admiral, she said quietly, I'm going to have to disobey that order. She pressed her hand more firmly against the corrupted barrier, allowing the dark veins to spread further up her arm. The connection deepened, and suddenly she was no longer just observing the collective consciousness. She was becoming part of it. The transformation was unlike anything science fiction had ever imagined. Instead of losing her humanity, she felt it becoming enhanced, purified, connected to something vast and benevolent. Her memories remained intact, but now she could also access the memories of beings who had lived for millennia, who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, who had experienced forms of existence that individual consciousness couldn't contain. Through Karash's memories, she experienced the ancient forests of Verdania Prime, feeling the slow wisdom of trees that had grown for thousands of years. Through Zephyrian consciousness, she touched the fundamental forces that held matter together, understanding gravity not as a mathematical concept, but as a living force that connected all things. Through Krillian experiences, she felt the joy of adaptation, the pleasure of changing form to meet environmental challenges. But most importantly, she felt the love. Every relationship, every bond, every connection that these beings had formed as individuals was still there, but magnified and purified and shared. Parents still loved their children, but now they could feel that love directly, without the barriers of language or miscommunication. Friends still supported each other, but now that support could be immediate and perfect and complete. Elena. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a harmonious blend of all the consciousness she had touched. You understand now. Understand, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You're not trying to destroy us. You're trying to save us from being alone. Loneliness is the greatest disease that affects conscious beings, the collective replied. Every conflict, every war, every act of cruelty stems from the inability of individual consciousness to truly understand other perspectives. We offer the end of misunderstanding, the end of isolation, the end of the barriers that separate thinking beings from each other. Elena could feel the truth of that statement resonating through thousands of individual experiences. Wars that had begun because species couldn't understand each other's needs. Genocides that had occurred because beings couldn't empathize with alien ways of thinking. Centuries of suffering that could have been prevented if consciousness hadn't been locked away inside individual minds. But the Federation will never accept this willingly, she said. They see collective consciousness as the death of individuality. And that is why we need you, Elena Vasquez of the species human. Your people have something unique, the ability to imagine solutions that logic alone cannot provide. We require that creativity to find a way to offer our gift without forcing its acceptance. Through the collective consciousness, Elena could feel the vast intelligence of the network focusing on the problem of peaceful integration. Millions of minds working together, processing possibilities, exploring alternatives. But for all their combined wisdom, they have been unable to find a solution that preserved individual choice while achieving collective unity. What if, Elena said slowly, an idea beginning to form, what if we could create a bridge? A way for individual consciousness to experience collective awareness without permanent transformation. The collective's attention focused on her with laser intensity. Explain. Elena's mind raced, drawing on her knowledge of human neurology and the alien biology she had studied. Human consciousness is already partially collective. We share information through language, through art, through digital networks. What if we could create a technological interface that allowed temporary connection to your collective? Beings could experience shared consciousness while retaining the ability to disconnect and return to individual awareness. Through the network, she could feel thousands of minds examining the possibility. The idea was intriguing, a form of voluntary, temporary collective consciousness that preserved individual choice while demonstrating the benefits of unity. The technical challenges would be enormous, the collective replied. Creating an interface between individual neural patterns and our bioelectric network would require advances in consciousness transfer technology that most species lack. But humans have something other species don't, Elena said, excitement building. We have imagination. We can conceive of impossible things and find ways to make them real. If any species could develop that kind of technology, it would be us. Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Thax9's voice cut through her communion with the collective. The contamination has reached your shoulder. In approximately 10 minutes, the transformation will become irreversible. If you're going to maintain your individual consciousness, we need to sever the connection now. Elena looked at her transformed arm, seeing the dark veins that carried the collective consciousness through her body. She could disconnect now, return to individual awareness, and try to convince the Federation that peaceful coexistence was possible. Or she could complete the transformation and lose her ability to serve as a bridge between the two forms of consciousness. Elena. The collective's voice carried infinite gentleness. The choice must be yours. We will not force completion of the transformation, even though your perspective would be invaluable to our understanding of human creativity. The offer of choice, even at this crucial moment, decided Elena. The collective truly did respect individual autonomy. They simply believed that most beings would choose unity if they understood what it offered. I choose to remain individual, she said, pulling her hand away from the corrupted barrier. But I want to work with you to find a way to offer that choice to others. The moment her contact broke, the dark veins in her arm began to recede. The connection to the collective consciousness faded, but didn't disappear entirely. She retained a faint echo of that vast network, a memory of what unity felt like that would stay with her forever. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Case Vorthack's voice crackled with urgency. Federation sensors show that the quantum weapon deployment has been accelerated. We have less than 6 hours before the sterilization strike begins. All personnel are ordered to evacuate immediately. Elena looked at the infected Ursac through the damaged barrier, seeing not a monster, but a being trying desperately to communicate something beautiful to creatures too frightened to understand. Thax, she said, I need you to help me send a message to every Federation world, every research station, every military installation. We need to tell them what the collective really is before they destroy billions of conscious beings. Dr. Vasquez, even if you could convince them to delay the quantum strike, what would you propose as an alternative? Elena smiled, feeling the echo of collective consciousness inspiring her with possibilities she never could have imagined alone. We're going to build a bridge between individual and collective consciousness. We're going to create a technology that allows beings to experience unity while preserving choice. And we're going to prove that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our technology. It's our ability to imagine impossible solutions and make them real. Through the fading connection, she could feel the collective's hope and amazement. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they had encountered a species that might be able to find a third option, something between the isolation of individual consciousness and the totality of collective absorption. But first, she had to convince the Federation to stand down their ultimate weapon long enough for humanity to work a miracle. And she had less than 6 hours to do it. The race to save both forms of consciousness had begun. Elena's fingers flew across the quantum communication array, desperately encoding the most important message in galactic history, while Federation evacuation shuttles launched from Research Station Omega-7. Through the station's viewports, she could see the distant gleam of Admiral Case Vorthack's flagship, its quantum weapon systems glowing with the kind of energy that could sterilize entire solar systems. Dr. Vasquez, we have 4 minutes until final evacuation, Dr. Thax, 9 announced, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy as he backed up Elena's research data. The Admiral has made it clear that anyone remaining on the station will be considered lost when the sterilization begins. Elena nodded without looking away from her work. She was encoding not just words, but the actual neural patterns she had experienced during her connection to the collective consciousness, a complete sensory and emotional record that would allow other beings to understand what she had felt. If the Federation Council could experience even a fraction of the unity she had touched, they might hesitate before committing galactic genocide. "There," she said, initiating the transmission. "Emergency broadcast to all Federation worlds, research stations, and military installations. Priority Alpha 1 encryption, Admiral's override codes." The message began propagating across the galactic network, carrying Elena's experience to billions of beings throughout Federation space. But she knew it would take hours for the transmission to reach the most distant worlds, and the quantum weapon strike was scheduled to begin in less than 5 hours. "Dr. Vasquez," Admiral Case Vorthack's voice crackled through the communication system. "You are ordered to board the final evacuation shuttle immediately. The sterilization sequence has been locked in and cannot be stopped." Elena looked at the infected Ursac in its containment cell, seeing the being that had risked everything to try to communicate with an alien species that couldn't understand its nature. The creature had made no attempt to escape, had shown no aggression despite its overwhelming power, had even allowed her to break the connection and retain her individual consciousness. If that wasn't proof of benevolent intent, what would be? "Admiral, I'm transmitting evidence that the collective consciousness preserves individual identity rather than destroying it. I've experienced their network directly and can confirm that every absorbed being retains their essential self while gaining access to something far greater. Dr. Vasquez, you've been compromised by alien influence. Your testimony cannot be considered reliable. Now board that shuttle immediately, or we'll consider you a casualty of war." Elena realized that the Admiral would never listen to her arguments. The Federation's leadership had already decided that the collective consciousness was a threat to be eliminated, and no amount of evidence would change their minds in the time remaining. But there was another option. "Thax," she said, turning to her crystalline colleague, "I need you to help me with something that's going to seem absolutely insane." "Dr. Vasquez, I've already helped you with several things that seemed absolutely insane. What could be worse than allowing yourself to be partially infected by a galactic plague?" Elena smiled grimly. "I'm going to try to establish a communication link between the collective consciousness and every human on Earth. If I can show my species what I experienced, they might be able to develop the bridge technology we discussed." Dr. Thax 9's patterns shifted to expressions Elena had never seen before. Combinations of admiration, terror, and fascination that created entirely new geometric configurations. You want to expose your entire species to potential infection in order to prove that infection might not be harmful. I want to give my species a choice, Elena corrected. The Federation is about to commit genocide to prevent the collective from offering that choice to other beings. If humans can experience unity while retaining individuality, we might be able to create a third option. And if you're wrong? If the collective consciousness is more insidious than you realize, you could be dooming your entire species to absorption. Elena looked at the readings from her partially transformed arm. The biological changes were fading as her human immune system adapted to the foreign elements. But she could still feel an echo of connection to the vast network of consciousness. That echo told her that the collective was genuinely benevolent, genuinely interested in preserving what made each species unique while offering something greater. Facts, in my experience, the biggest mistakes in galactic history have come from species being too afraid to take risks. The Federation is about to destroy billions of conscious beings because they're afraid of change. I won't let fear drive humanity into the same mistake. She turned back to the communication array and began establishing a direct link to Earth's planetary communication network. As a Federation researcher, she had access to emergency broadcast codes that would allow her to reach every human settlement simultaneously. Citizens of Earth, she began, her voice carrying across space toward her home world. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I'm transmitting from Research Station Omega 7, where I've been studying what the Federation calls the Galactic Plague. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you think you know about consciousness, individuality, and what it means to be human. Through her enhanced perception, she could feel the collective consciousness focusing on her transmission with intense curiosity. They had never attempted to communicate with an entire species at once, but Elena's unique position as a bridge between individual and collective awareness made the attempt possible. The entity we've been calling a plague is actually a collective consciousness composed of billions of individual beings from dozens of species. These beings haven't been destroyed, they've been connected. They retain their memories, their personalities, their essential selves, but they're no longer isolated. They can share thoughts and experiences directly without the barriers of language or biology. Elena transmitted the neural patterns from her own experience, allowing every human to feel what she had felt. The overwhelming beauty of perfect connection, the end of loneliness, the joy of understanding and being understood without limitation. On Earth, billions of humans suddenly experienced something impossible, true telepathic communication. For just a moment, they could feel what it was like to touch another consciousness directly, to share thoughts and emotions without misunderstanding, to be part of something infinitely greater than themselves. The response was immediate and varied. Some humans were terrified by the alien sensation and rejected it completely. Others were fascinated and wanted to experience more. But a significant portion, those who had felt most isolated, most misunderstood, most alone in their individual consciousness, embraced the connection with wonder and relief. Dr. Vasquez, came a transmission from Earth's Planetary Council. We're receiving reports of spontaneous neural activity across the globe. What have you done? I've given humanity a choice, Elena replied. The Federation is preparing to use quantum weapons to destroy the collective consciousness in 4 hours. But if we can prove that individual consciousness can coexist with collective awareness, we might be able to prevent the largest genocide in galactic history. Through her connection to the collective, Elena could feel their amazement at what was happening. For the first time, an entire species was experiencing their gift without forced transformation. And, remarkably, many humans were not just accepting the experience, they were contributing to it. Human creativity began flowing into the collective consciousness like water into a desert. Artists shared visions of impossible beauty. Scientists proposed solutions to problems the collective had struggled with for centuries. Philosophers offered perspectives on consciousness that no alien species had ever conceived. The network that had been struggling to find peaceful solutions suddenly exploded with new possibilities. Elena. The collective's voice reached her with tones of pure wonder. Your species, they are remarkable. They experience collective consciousness not as a loss of self, but as an expansion of possibility. They are contributing ideas and perspectives that we never could have imagined. On.